We're going to talk a lot about technology today because we're Google, and that's kind of what we like to talk about. I'm going to start on a little different path. I will talk about technology, but as you can see here, the title of the topic I want to talk about is technology, innovation, and leadership. And I'm sort of fascinated by this topic, and really it could have been leadership as the first word rather than the third. But as I think about our technology and what we're trying to do, I think it is fascinating to really think about how it relates to leadership. What is the connection there that matters? And because in the end, as everybody always knows, technology is just a means to an end. It is nothing in itself other than to help you achieve your mission. And so I like to think hard about this, and this is where I'm going to talk about the relationship there, what I think it implies for what we're trying to do, hopefully what you're trying to do, and potentially what we can be doing together. When I think about leadership, I tend to think about leaders in times of difficulty and crisis, because that's when leadership shows. And when you think about that, you naturally start to, if you have any sort of interest in history, it tends to veer towards discussions of times of war, things of that nature. And I am one of those sort of hack, semi-amateur historians who loves to read about things like the Second World War and the role that Winston Churchill played in that war. And this actually does relate to technology. I'm actually right now kind of in the second pass of reading through his 6-book series of kind of memoirs of World War II, starting with really the 10-year period before the war, through the war. And it's really fascinating to kind of read about, all through this series, his relationship with technology and how he thought about it. And there's no sort of more significant crisis than what the British people faced in May 1940, and his reaction to it and all the things he did. But and through these stories, Churchill will say constantly, I am, in his own way, eloquent English that I could never replicate. He'll say, I am not a technologist. I am not technical. I know nothing about this stuff. However, and he'll always say, he would have a few areas that he knew were potentially game-changing for the success of their mission, which was really to prevent an invasion of the British islands. And whether it was radar, which was just coming into being at the time, and the importance of being able to detect planes that were coming to bomb the British islands before they would get there, or whether it was floating mines and the ability to avoid them, or ability to defuse them before they blew up ships transporting goods to England. These different sort of categories, and in each case, he pretty much recognized, without knowing very much about any of the technologies behind them, the impact they could have on the war and on the UK's situation. It was very powerful. He had a researcher, a guy named Dr. Linderman, who was a physicist at Oxford, who he kind of leaned on. As I read through this, I say, that's his CIO. It's really amazing. But he would go to him and say, what about this? If we could do this, wouldn't it be impactful? And then he would just swarm a team onto a problem and say, I would like to see something out of this, and how's 2 weeks sound? And it would be but if you looked at the change in technology that happened over the course of the Second World War, it's actually pretty astounding. Things came into service and then were obsoleted in matters of months. It was just astounding. And his leadership really, without really being a technical person, frankly, showed me the relationship in how it matters, which is a mission, technology as an enabler, and urgency. And I thought it was a very powerful sort of historical version of this. Let me talk about a much more modern version. This is Oriokola. She's a Kenyan blogger. And in 2007, there was a presidential election that was very contentious in Kenya. And it was a contested election. And toward the beginning of 2008, after it, violence broke out and in many places. And Ori, as a blogger, was trying to sort of capture what was happening and writing blogs about it, trying to record it, if you will. And then commenters to her blog were contributing what they were seeing elsewhere. So it was really a sort of grassroots attempt to capture and record what was happening in Kenya after this election. And the blogging technology essentially failed. She couldn't keep up with all the people posting comments to her blog and curating them and trying to figure out how to fit it together. And she was very frustrated. And a couple of the people posting on this blog said, we can help. And they built a tool that would allow anybody in Kenya, whether anybody with a mobile phone, by SMS or by a mobile application, if they had that type of phone, to submit information where it would be aggregated onto a map. And this became what's called Ushahidi. And Ushahidi means testimonial in Swahili. And a very simple technology. It was built by 2 guys in a week and put live. And then, since then, more than 45,000 people have contributed to this, this map of what happened. And this technology didn't stop there. So, but the important thing I want to say here is it was started by leadership, somebody who wanted to have an impact. It's very simple, lightweight technology. If you, this is sort of a couple more examples I'll talk about in a second, but very, very simple, lightweight technology. If you think of the tools at the disposal of that you all have, our government, whether it's mapping tools or communication tools, absolutely infantile in terms of the technology that you used. Off the shelf, yet incredibly powerful, the effect that they were able to have. Ushahidi is now a nonprofit. It's being used in dozens of countries around the world, monitoring elections, responding to natural disasters such as the tsunami and earthquake problems in Japan you can see here, political protests that's happening in the Middle East, all powered by a very, very simple technology that aggregates information from a network of people around the world. Incredibly powerful and really born of a very simple mission of Ori. And I have to say in disclaimer, she has since become a Google employee and works for our team in Africa. Just to bring it right home here to Washington, D.C., home of the 100-degree late spring days. In the commercial world, this happens too. LivingSocial, which is a locally grown team, Tim O'Shaughnessy, the leader of this team, is just doing an amazing thing. A little over a year ago, they were a 33-person team who saw this opportunity to deliver value to local vendors, to local commerce, by providing offers out there that people could respond to. A very simple idea. LivingSocial and Groupon really have jumped on this. In a matter of just over a year, this company's grown to 1,500 people from 33. It's expected to do in the range of $1 billion this year. So it's just staggering how they saw this opportunity that was opening up, and they're able to react to it, and able to use off-the-shelf technology. They do some great technology development themselves, but to be able to move that quickly and leverage the cloud, leverage things, and turn that into the type of business they've built is nothing short of amazing. I think this is today's offer, by the way. I don't know if anybody wants to do the rebel race today. It's feeling a little warm to be racing. But this is today's offer from LivingSocial. But that sort of amazing ability to scale from almost nothing, frankly, a year ago, to a business of that scale, $1 billion, is mind-boggling. And really, this is, again, what the technology can enable. And, of course, amazing leadership and human spirit from people like Tim. Swarming is an interesting concept. I like to say, these are all examples of swarming. And swarming doesn't just happen. There is a catalyst for it in all cases. In some cases, a catalyst may be an existential event, a natural disaster that causes the human reaction to help others to take action. So sometimes it's caused by either a positive or negative, or something that happens that you have to react to, and people swarm. Other times, it's actually the result of a mission. It's a result of a passionately held idea that a leader is able to rally people behind. May not be reacting to any particular thing, but it is getting people swarming around an idea and a thought and a mission and a direction very quickly. If you think about a few examples of this, the very classic President Kennedy in 1961, only a month after the first American, John Glenn, had been in space, said, "I think we should put somebody on the moon." And a lot of the folks at NASA, I know, were very doubtful, and it's sort of like when the boss goes out there and says, "I think we ought to do this," and everybody goes, "Oh, jeez." And I'm sure the folks at NASA felt that way in 1961. But look what happened. In July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. And just an extraordinary amount of energy and focus, and that is a true swarming activity. Who's heard of the DARPA Red Balloon Challenge? Yeah, so DARPA had this challenge, which I think is fascinating, where they've essentially released 10 red balloons into the air at unknown locations anywhere in the United States, and challenged teams to say, how fast can you locate those machines, go locate those balloons and come back and say where these 10 balloons are. And as fascinating as that is, across the entire United States, any single person would not even have a prayer by any statistical measure of finding even one balloon never mind 10 balloons. Yet a team from MIT who responded to this actually found all 10 balloons in 9 hours. And it's just a staggering thing, and they did it by creating a network of people who never could do it alone, who had incentive, there was prize money involved, to help others find the red balloons. And in 9 hours, they were located. That is a swarm, and it's, with the leadership and intent and smarts put together. I also say, in our government swarms all the time. The Department of Commerce does counts every American. Every 10 years, we actually count every American, which is a staggering thing. Thousands of people are hired and put to work very short order, and then and then disbanded soon thereafter, every 10 years. That's a swarm. That's a mission. That's an urgent, necessary thing. And the idea of swarming around an idea in grabbing technology, whatever it might be, to react is a very powerful one. I'll tell you a bit about what we're doing. Where are we swarming? What are we thinking about? First of all, people often ask me what is unique or different about Google as a company. And it's a very difficult question to answer. It's a different cultural thing. We have some very unique and strong-minded founders that lead us. But one of the ways I do think about it is almost everything we do is a swarm. We have no steady state. We don't know steady state. We're sort of like swarming after one thing and then the next, and it's kind of the way we operate. And in certain ways, it's unsettling, but in other ways, it allows us to do amazing things. In the enterprise part of Google, we are swarming because we see an amazing opportunity to have an impact on how people work together with technology that has really come into its own. So our swarm for our team is really about being first and best in cloud computing. In our view, this is a lot of the technology that can enable things you could never do before at a speed, at a cost, at a capability level that is just never heard of before. So when we think about it, we say, this is a great opportunity. We can help a lot. We can build a great business. And Google has some unique capabilities to bring to bear here. And this is what it's about. First of all, the technology is people-centric. It's not technology-centric. It is about how people work together and enabling people to get things done faster and to work together more productively. It ought to feel seamless. So everything about our technology is about teams and people. The prior generation, the PC era of technology was about personal productivity. Amazing what you could do on a spreadsheet, sitting on a machine, without access to the mainframe. Very empowering and liberating as an individual. This generation of technology is about teams, and that is really what's different about it. Reliability. Now, everybody's mission is critical. Some may be more mission critical than others, but trust me when I say everyone who cares about their job or about what they're doing needs their systems to work reliably. And so our focus is not only having the best usable, most empowering system, but to have it that is always available in a mission-critical sense. And we have a lot of advantages in this regard. You can actually tell through a lot of the natural disasters that happen, the situation in Japan, where a lot of times Google and the tools we provide were actually the only things operating. And that is because of the scale we operate at, the amazing amount of redundancy and resiliency and that the cloud can offer. So I think it's probably a historical notion that the cloud is somehow not as flaky or unreliable. It certainly isn't perfect, but on a relative basis, the cloud is incredibly reliable and consistent in its ability to serve users. But we want to make it better. There's no end to this goal until it's 100.00%. And even then, we're going to say, what's the latency on every transaction that you do? And if it's human recognizable, we're not there yet. Security. Trust me when we say securing data, protecting the data of our users and of our customers is absolutely the first job that we have. And we have a very large, perhaps what I would say is one of the best information security teams in the industry. And you've read a lot about things that we do, challenges we've faced, issues we've tackled. And I can tell you that this is something I personally feel very proud of, how Google's reacted and responded and put together what I think is one of the most phenomenal teams and one of the most phenomenally secure systems. We also do a lot of work to say, look, it's not just available to some giant company who has a lot of resources to think about it. It should be available to everybody. Everybody with an email account should have access to simple, trivially easy two-factor authentication, because passwords do get stolen. And with a very simple system, you can prevent 99.9xxx% of the problems that happen through social engineering. So these are the things we think very hard about. How do we create security systems that not only work for great companies and allow them to feel comfortable using our systems, but work for everybody? And it's a never-ending job, but this is something we take very, very seriously. And of course, affordability. All this, particularly in the times we face in terms of budgets and challenges, all for naught if there isn't a real move toward being able to save a lot of money, being able to redeploy resources onto something more strategic. And that is the essence of the cloud, is letting somebody help you with those that are just contextual, those parts of your systems that are contextual that somebody else probably can do at scale and at much lower economics than you could do, and allow your teams to focus predominantly on those things that are central and mission critical and unique to what you're doing. And I think that's, so this is our swarming. Every week we are in intense meetings talking about how we can change the game in each one of these. How can we push our costs lower so we can pass it along? How can we make security even tighter? And what sort of process we're going through? What kind of background checks our employees are getting? How we reduce, you know, the risk exposure or the threat surface, if you will, on our systems. These are things we're working on constantly. And of course, how do we make it more usable? How do we make it more just intuitive and simple? So like Ori, starting in Kenya, people can just jump in and get things done, because in the end, that's what it's all about. I want to share with you a little bit, I think, of where we think enterprise technology is going. And this is a bit of a beacon, you know, one of these places you don't ultimately get to perfectly, but it is clearly a direction, and it's a direction we want to help take the technology, because I think in the end it's very empowering. First of all, lightweight. I mean, to be honest, I guess if you know, those in the military understand this. Taking a lot of things with you is difficult, and it slows you down. And it's the same thing with technology. The more stuff you own, you have to maintain and build and upgrade and patch, the slower you move. And at some point, you grind to a halt. And I guess that's when the supply lines can't keep up with you anymore in the other world. But the world's changing in this way. I think in the commercial world, going out 5 years, most companies won't have data centers. I think they'll be maybe in the hundreds, the numbers of companies who will actually need and require their own data center. And the vast majority of businesses will be able to tap into what they need over a network, a grid, available to them. And they will be better off for that. They'll move quicker. In fact, a lot of the companies, the hottest technology companies you see, and I know a lot of these folks that run them and build them, they don't actually own any computers. It's astounding. I met with a company that's about a $100 million technology company growing leaps and bounds, and they do not own any computers. It's astounding. In this case, they actually use Amazon to host their services, and it's astounding what they do without owning things. Pay as you go. Now, this is the obvious notion of cloud computing. You pay for what you need. And that may sound obvious, but in the technology world, it makes people's heads spin around in circles, because that's not how it's supposed to work. And you know, the whole notion of somebody building you a cloud, to me, is sort of an anachronism. It's, you know, the whole idea is that you should be able to tap into technology when you need it, only pay what you need. There's actually an amazing advantage in terms of the environment and our impact on the environment that the cloud offers. Our data centers are pretty radically more efficient than anybody else's in the world, you know, by a factor of 2 or sometimes even more. And that's really measured by, you know, the amount of energy that goes in and how much of that is actually applied to in the servers, in the computation, as opposed to cooling systems and other separate systems. And that's really important. That means every time you shut down systems here and turn on cloud stuff here, you're actually reducing carbon footprint. And it may sound like small potatoes at one level, but if you think about the whole industry moving in this direction, it's actually a really important opportunity. It's also, you see why Google is very interested in renewable energy, doing a lot of investments and building these very, very large data centers near sources of low-cost renewable energy. So, because, you know, from our bill of materials, if you will, the product we deliver to you all, energy is actually right in the middle of it. It's one of the biggest, most important cost factors that we think about. Diversity. This is really interesting, but, you know, if you grew up in IT in the last 20 or 30 years, it's been all about standardization, right? The only way to make this client-server architecture keep up with us and reduce the complexity such that maybe we can keep going with it is standardization. A standard image on your desktop, a standard set of vendors that you have to support on the back end, trying to keep the fewest number of OSs, operating systems, across your company and versions of them. And so it's all been about getting towards standards. And while that's sort of been optimized for IT, it's counter-optimized, if that's a word, for the end user, who's essentially told, here's what you get, right? Well, the world of cloud computing is very different. Security and management doesn't happen because everybody has the exact same thing. It's because the data and the smarts and the applications are in the cloud and they're standard. And the devices you use matter much, much less because you don't necessarily depend on the device itself per se for security or for management of the data. It's much more personal choice. And this is very empowering. This is very empowering people to say, you can use the device that works best for you in your situation. Yet the data is still secure, and you can feel very confident in that. Now, a lot of people get really scared about this. Intuitively go, oh, my goodness, like people connecting to my, to my systems and my network, et cetera. But it's actually a very different world. What I am very confident that we're seeing evolve is a very, very tightly secure cloud with devices that operate under a very strict set of guidelines to access it. But actually, the diversity of devices that access it prove the security. They make it more secure over time because there is actually strength in diversity. It's a little bit of this, it's almost like a biodiversity type of reasoning behind it. But I think this is happening. I mean, 3 years ago, it would have been crazy for somebody to walk into work and say, hey, I bought this fancy new white phone. Could I please attach it to the corporate network and access my email? You'd have been laughed out of the room. And it's happening in droves now. It's happening all over the place. First it was those phones, then it's those funny little flat tablets, and it's happening everywhere. I see them all along in the rows here. So somehow you're using them. But diversity is going to be a strength. And the experiences that you have will be consistent and predictable. They're very you-centric, right? They're not designed around someone else's idea of the process. They help you get your job done based on what you need. And that's really a very people-centric approach. We think that's very important. And I think ultimately, and maybe this is the hardest one to imagine because we're so far from it today, but technology will be invisible. If you have to think about the technology, it's a failure. If you have to click send and stare at that thing and wonder, is it sent? Failure, right? Technology should be so invisible that you don't notice. You don't notice it at all. Your mind is 100% focused on your mission and what you're trying to accomplish. The technology is enabling it. And we fail at this every day. Google fails at it. Every company out there fails at it. We have to do better. There should be no disruption of thought. You should be able to do what you want without thinking about it, without wondering about whether it's working or how to do it right. You shouldn't have more technology than you need. That's the truth. Some of these examples I showed you are incredibly lightweight, simplistic systems that a lot of traditional IT folks would probably find laughable. Yet look at the impact. They were exactly what was needed at the right time. They didn't say, here's the RFP for the geo-mapping system so that we can collect data in Kenya to monitor the violence after. It was 2 people that built it in a week, and look at the impact they've had. And they've had in the few years since then is astounding. And empowering. The whole thing about how do you empower teams to get things done, to swarm, to take action. And I think this is what the technology should be doing. As opposed to the burden you carry with you, it should be the tool that unlocks your mission. And this is what we want to do. I don't mean to claim Google is here or anybody else is here yet, but I think if there's success in this whole notion of cloud computing, it's going to take the entire industry pretty radically in this direction, and hopefully faster than you can imagine. This is a great story. One of the areas we spend a lot of time in is education. And 4.5 years ago, the very first, about half of the colleges in the United States use Google Apps now, up from approximately 0 4.5 years ago. It didn't exist. But the first large university that went on to Google Apps was Arizona State. And I met with the CIO at the time, a guy named Adrian Sanier. He was a brand new CIO. And he had kind of explained it to me that, Arizona State, it's not really, what he said, is not really a prestigious institution, and it's not necessarily exclusive, and it doesn't have the budgets of the large private institutions. So they have a lot of challenges. And I remember him telling me that, the real elite schools, they're judged by who can get in and who can't, the exclusivity of them. That's not their mission at ASU. They want to be inclusive. So they want to judge not by the input, but by the output. And so they said, we have to do some things differently. So Adrian met with the new president. Michael Crow was the new president at ASU at the time. And he said, we have to think very differently about this problem because we really can't keep up. And he drew this picture on a napkin for the new president. And he was kind enough to give it to me later. Now, this was 2006, so that you can kind of understand the dates on this thing. But he said, look what's happening in technology. Look what people like Amazon and Google are doing. They're on this innovation curve that looks like this. With that lousy budget you gave me, this is about the best I could do in my world. But with a very small effort, I think I could latch onto that innovation curve that's being driven by essentially what is the cloud now. We didn't have that name back then. And we think we can achieve a lot more. So ASU basically, and he challenged us, our product was hardly in the market yet. We had no data migration tools. The product wasn't a shadow of what it is today. And he said, I said to him, well, when do you think that you could get your students onto it? And he said, when do you think you could get our students onto it? And he challenged us. In a matter of a few weeks, literally, they moved Arizona State to Google Apps. And when they made it, they turned it on. The first day it was optional. They were getting 300 signups per minute for Google Apps from their students. And since then, now they're actually, it's 4.5 years later, they have graduating classes that are leaving Google. They have never used anything but the cloud in their academic systems and how they operate and how they do things. 500,000 documents have been created by students in that time and shared and class projects and everything else. It's very central to their system. But it's an amazing move that, and nobody had done it, by the way. If he asked me what other university could I go talk to who's done this, I would just say, there are none. So if you don't want to be first, we'll come back and talk to you another time. Times have changed a lot, but that was a leadership and a willingness to take a chance and take a risk, and we worked very closely with Adrian, and it's been a great success. But these are the kind of things that I think about when I think about leadership. It happens, and it is happening in spades across the government, in the federal government, across many parts of the country, state and local governments. People are stepping up and saying, we want to lead. We want to do something different. And these are some examples of folks. You'll hear from some folks today. And I'm not going to go into details on any of these guys and what they're doing. I just share a few quotes. We kind of just pick some quotes. We won't even attribute them. But they're kind of, sometimes language tells a lot, what people say. And when you sort of hear these folks and talk to them, it's people that want to have fundamentally big impact. They want to change the way things operate. They think about innovation as something you have to do every day. Fundamentally more innovative. Better, faster, cheaper. So these are like people who just want to jump in, want to make a change, and you can tell by their attitude. I always say, whenever we talk to any organization, large or small, public sector or private sector, when you have the conversation with the leadership, you know whether it's a good time for us to spend our time there. We're still a modest size organization. We're not that big of a company, so we have to focus. And it's very clear when there are folks that say, please tell me why we can't do this, and they're ready to fight and say, that's not a good reason, that's not a good reason, that's not a reason. There's a whole other set of people who will naturally say, let me tell you all the reasons we can't do this, and please tell me why we should. It's very obvious for us. People just fall into these buckets, and it's for us, we obviously spend our time on those who want to do it, who want to find their way through whatever challenges, and there's plenty of them. We don't by any means dismiss the challenges and the issues associated with moving to something like a cloud computing solution. But clearly it's changing. There's enough track record, enough history that I think it's getting easier and more understandable. And our goal really is to continue down that path. So I would just ask you to think, as I wrap up, as you think through today, what are you swarming on? As a leader in technology, hopefully you're swarming on something. Hopefully you have a burning platform, a mission that you feel keeps you up at night that you want to deliver on. And I think cloud computing has the potential to help you in that regard. It's certainly not the end-all, be-all. It's an enabler. But I think it's a very powerful enabler. So I just encourage you, as you go through the day, you hear about all the things happening, you hear what other folks are doing, think about that. What is your mission? What are you swarming on? And hopefully you'll have a very good answer to that. Well, thank you all, and I think it's going to be a great day. And we'll be here. I'll come up and wrap up at the end. But again, I just want to thank you all for spending your time with us. Thank you.